Hello, everybody. I hope you're tuning in today and that you're safe. Good day to everybody. My name is George Martinez, and I am a candidate for the Assembly here in Anchorage for District 5, Seat I. And I'm thrilled to have this conversation. Throughout my campaign, we'll have a series of community conversations, uh, really not focusing on the most expertise perspective from the jargon, vantage point, but really about a real world look at some of the issues from folks in our own community. So I'm happy that you're able to join us on the Facebook. If you're tuning in live, please feel free to offer any questions or thoughts that you would like to share with us as well. But at the very onset, I just want to also acknowledge that and pause to recognize that I am coming from Anchorage, and this is where I live with my family. I have two little ones in the school district, and I live here with my wife for almost 19. We're married for almost 19 years now. But we're coming from Anchorage, which is the ancestral land of the Dena'ina Athabascans, whose stewardship once was and remains today. And I want to just give that land acknowledgement at the start of our broadcast. And today we have a couple of really good community folk who have great perspectives on the questions at hand. And we're going to look a little bit about, in our conversation about early childhood education, we're going to talk about pre-K and those early investments. And then we're also going to talk about before and after school programming and really thinking of the holistic ecosystem that we need to be able to have a strong pathway for our young people. But before we go to our first guest, I wanted to also share on the screen this piece of information. Now, it may be hard to see, folks, but I'll scroll where you can find this information. All of this information is at this thread here, Thread Alaska, and I'll keep posting that out throughout the evening. But one note here that I wanted to highlight in the far right-hand side on the lower side, just the cost of the cost of percentage for household income, and as you see, as you get down to the category where I grew up in as a child of a single mom, uh, the average percentage here in Alaska, in Anchorage, for childcare is almost 40% of one's household income, and that's pretty substantial when you consider the cost of living in Anchorage and other elements of just what it takes to survive, and let alone survive here, let alone thrive in our community. So when you're dealing with the child of a single parent, and when you deal with single mothers, and they have a 40% uh, ratio to their income, well, that really is limiting to a lot of what's going on, and a lot of possibilities. So I wanted to just flag that as we just begin to get into our conversation, and we're going to look at a little bit additional data that just highlights the value of early childhood education. But I'm going to bring my first guest on, a community member. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. They're affectionately known as Miss Roz. And so I'm going to bring Ms. Roz. Hey, sis, I'll bring Ms. Roz onto the program. And here we are. Um, Thank you for being with me tonight. I know you live and breathe education. Your education begins at home, and I know you are a parent, and then you're also a professional on your journey. Can you just share with folks a little bit about yourself so we have a context from where your perspective is coming from, and then we'll get into our chat?
Yes. So, hello, everyone. I am what the kids call Miss Roz, but everybody knows me as Little Roz as well. I am an aspiring special education teacher in the state of Alaska. I'm currently in my senior year at Grand Canyon University, working on a dual degree in special education and elementary education. I currently work with ASD as a long term sub, as a primary special education teacher, and my current focus is kindergarten and first grade. I've been working with ASD for some time now. Prior to this, I was a paraprofessional with preschool special education preschoolers. Yeah, so I'm
Excellent.
working at Mountain View in the most diverse neighborhood in Alaska and in America, I believe.
Absolutely, and recognizing that here in East Anchorage, across the assembly district that I'm running for, we have both East High and Bartlett, which are two of the three most diverse high schools in the country, and a lot of the students that you'll see early on will eventually wind up at East.
Yes, yes. For
Right
our
on.
district, we are in East District.
Exactly. So first of all, Roz, thank you for your work in our community, and thank you for your interest in pursuing that career. It really matters, especially nowadays, where there's so much more transition happening across our community. But I wanted you imagine with me first uh, a world where Anchorage has every child has pre-K. Let's imagine that every child has pre-K, and those before and after the school opportunities. Let's just understand how investing in early childhood education, like pre-K, expanded pre-K, really provides the opportunity and the foundation for our youth. We know the data. We know what the data tells us. We know that there's indications about early grades. We know that there's a dollar investment of every dollar in, you get more out in your economic building. But from a firsthand perspective, what does having pre-K and early childhood education opportunities in our community mean for real families?
To me, it means change. It means filling in that gap. I mean, a majority children in this neighborhood are children of color.
Hmm.
So when you have universal preschool, like that, there's many opportunities there. One, families can work because they're
Hmm.
not at home taking care of those 3 and 4 year olds. And we're laying foundations, we're preparing those babies for kindergarten, for ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, where every child isn't receiving those foundations at home. So when you do that, that ups your reading scores, right? Because if they're already learning these basic foundations in preschool, well, they're already going to know where they need to be at in kindergarten. Just from me alone, I have 3 elementary education babies right now. One is in first grade, 2 of them are in kindergarten. All of them started, I was able to get them in early intervention services through ASD, which qualified them for special education resource preschool, which we have that program here at my school for 3 and 4 year olds. And preschool, daycare is all about play and taking care of the baby. You do have some daycares that will teach, but for a fact that if you send your preschooler to school, they are going to get educational foundations. And so seeing
Yeah.
the differences between my kids receiving preschool and
Hmm.
my daughter being in first grade, that's huge versus those children that just
That
started
don't have
school
that.
in kindergarten.
That's right. You hit 2 points that I really wanted to highlight, Roz. And the first one was economic opportunity, right? Like going to being able to have that foundation of childcare so that people could go to work, and people could seek employment, and people could have their businesses, and that economic component of a world, they have the time for it. And when we don't have that investment, what we're really saying is there are a lot of people who are left out of the opportunity to pursue their economic journey. And so
Mhm.
to be able to expand employment and grow our economy, I think now we're highlighting that an investment in closing the gap of childcare and pre-K is going to expand our economic growth. It's just it's connected. It's part of a continuum. I think that's really clear, and I really appreciate that. And what
Oh,
that
yeah.
means for real people is that uh, they're able to again provide the quality of life that for their and a better quality of life for their children, right? So
I
that matters.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I have a neighbor right now that is unable to work because she can't afford to put 2 of her
Hmm.
preschool children in daycare.
Right.
I mean, you have daycare assistants, but there's a process to everything, versus daycare assistants, you're going to get help. You might get a little bit of help. You might get full help. But universal preschool, you're sending your child to school, you know? And so that's huge, because if she could send her children to school, then she could go to work. And ultimately,
yes, Roz, and we saw that with the pandemic, when people were in businesses or had jobs that were shut, or had kind of a transition workforce where schools were closed. When we wanted to get the economy going again, we wanted to get back to work. It was really difficult, and it still is difficult for a lot of people because of that gap. So getting back to even the economy that people remember when we had more kind of vibrancy and a going forward, it's difficult to get that back on track. Roz, let me hit this other point that you mentioned on that element, because now we're going to an area where, and I'm really glad that you mentioned like the diversity of kids in your community, the ones that you see, our communities of color, young folks of color, and that investment and how that matters right here in the community that you see visibly. But let me add this as element as well. We're not just talking about pre-K and early childhood education, we're talking about quality, because you mentioned that the difference between preparation matters. So we're not just talking about babysitting time. We're not talking about kind of stash your kids and store them for while you go to work time. We're talking about high quality early childhood education in the form of pre-K and those programs that give the foundation for parents to be able to have their children excel or move forward in school. And we know that when parents work, now you're dealing with almost 30+% of the time where your kid, a child, is connected to a caring professional in that environment. That's only going to really make the difference versus the latchkey kid or the kid that doesn't have that opportunity earlier on, and the family that cannot afford those investments. And you want to speak to the quality and how quality matters as well?
Well, yes. So, when you're putting your child in a universal preschool, the quality is the most important, because, again, like you stated, you're not just coming to be babysat. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like when you see universal preschool and they have almost the same expectations as school, because preschool should be play-based, but there should be education involved within that play base. So like when I was a paraprofessional for my preschoolers, we had sections, we had make-believe, we had dress up, we had home, we had kitchen. Well, we also had these things in certain colors. We had when it was time to eat lunch, they ate lunch at the tables. They ate on plates. They used forks and spoons. We had cups for these babies, so it wasn't just come in and
free for all.
You're in daycare. Yeah. No, it wasn't none of that. And it's definitely not a nap time. Now, I know preschool, preschool starts later. Sometimes you have preschools in 2 sessions. And as long as that rigorous play education is there, I mean, that shows positive effects of you have that strong program. It continues to go to then grade school, that then program goes to middle school, high school, so on and so forth. And so the effects of preschool, I mean, it reverberates.
Right. It rides across time.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen the difference. I've seen the difference in what they want to call a COVID baby. I have my personal children alone. They went through COVID. They still went to preschool. They was on the computers in preschool. Mm-hmm. They, even though I was still a para, I still opened up the computers, had them on the preschool. When it was time to go into buildings, I didn't really have a choice as a para, but they came into the buildings with me and they went to preschool then. And so seeing how my babies versus a baby that did not get to go to school during the pandemic because of of the colds or whatever, whatever
Right.
that fit that family.
Right.
You see a difference. And now that I am a special education teacher, like grades, kindergarten, I mean, like people don't understand how important preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade is important to our children, important to their reading, important to their way of life. And so if they could get like, I didn't really understand it until I had kids, and it wasn't even so much that I wanted to just go to work, but I want my kids to be educated. I want them to be successful. And I want them to understand what it's like to be in a school. And so when you have those strong foundations, when you have that strong schedule, and whether it's a visual schedule, because everything should be visual, everything should be
everything
colorful,
matters. It all matters. I
yeah.
mean, that's the spongiest time of a child's life where they're absorbing all of that. And again, if they have a substantial amount of time without being separated from their parent because of employment and their parents working, and that educational program gives them that opportunity, then you really want to make sure it's high quality.
Yeah,
And and let me turn it around on its head so that we understand when we start advancing this in our community, because there is a pathway forward. I'm committed to early childhood education. I'm committed to expanding pre-K. I think there's a way forward. I'm going to highlight some folks who are working on an opportunity for all of us to vote on, driving an investment in that area. So that's exciting, that what we could do at the municipality. But I wanted to just turn it around and kind of in the closed part of this thread here, and just look at it from the educator's perspective as well. And I'll use the New York study. New York expanded pre-K, and they went from 17,000 kids on pre-K to like 60,000 kids on pre-K every day. Like, so they expanded it for pre-K for all. But what they found was that the equity questions that weren't resolved early on, especially when you're dealing with marginalized, historically marginalized, and vulnerable populations, those equity questions that weren't dealt with early on only persisted, so that what you had was a disparity of quality, even though there was an expansion of the programs. So that the quality disparity and that equity question there around resources for educators, around pay, and really making sure that there was a pipeline for high quality educators who are coming into the pipeline. So we really want to understand this pipeline, what resources we need to be focusing on, how we could strengthen, making sure that we have high quality early childhood education and pre-K by supporting our educators and the pipeline to bring diverse voices into the classroom.
Well, George, what we need to get back to, and this is because I am in college currently, is reminding kids how cool it is to be a teacher, first of all. When the kids see me, they see themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, understanding how expensive it is to go to school. And when it came to me getting ready to take my exams to become a teacher, because right now I am in teacher prep coursework. And at the end of your coursework, you have to take these exams called praxis and cores and contents. And I didn't realize that they were $90 and up a pop. And I mean, these exams are, I compare it to being a lawyer. When the lawyers got to go take that exam, it's a very important exam, the bar. And so, I didn't realize, for us to not have as many educators and the support in that area, I think is very important. I am a independent mom of 5. I pay to go to school. I look for every scholarship that I can. So far, I mean, I honestly really only got the Teach grant as well as I guess you say won the Tom Begich scholarship. That I think Nick Begich, my bad, Nick Begich scholarship. I won that. But other than that, I pay out of pocket to go to school.
Right.
And so when you bring in those foundations, it's scary because as educators, we're really, I hate to say it, but we're really not supported like we should be. And we're not respected like we should be. And so if we could get back as a society to understand, we all went to school. We all learned from somebody. I would have loved to, growing up in Anchorage, I would have loved to have learned from more that looked like me, or more that understood me, or understood that my mom was a working single parent. But we didn't have that. And so now that we're trying to get that, I want our community to really dive into what it is to become a teacher, what it is to become an educator, what it is to become a preschool teacher. My homegirl, my employee, she just became got her like bachelor's or master's in preschool, and sometimes you got to get that extra niche. You might already have your bachelor's, but you still got to go and get your teacher's cert. You still got to take all, Alaska studies and all these other things. But where we're not supported is that funding, in my opinion. And so it's really important as, I would hope that assembly members, I know you all can do so much, but our legislators, I really pray and hope that they look at what it is to become an educator. Now, I'm not asking them to dumb it down by far. No, because that's where them foundations are. You have a lot of you have a lot of passionate educators right now, but cannot become teachers because they cannot pass that praxis, that core. It's just it's not equitable. And so, and that's just my opinion. And so, I think that is very important, that we take a look at that. I mean, obviously, I know that people passed it, but a lot of my mentors, they were grandfathered in. So everybody I was asking for help and study help, they really didn't know how to help me.
Rosalind, and I really appreciate that you flagged that point, because see, that's an inside perspective that most people are not going to get. But let me take a step back to the first one that you mentioned, and I just wanted to flag that as well, which is the attacks against public education. The political attacks have undermined the integrity of the brand of the profession. There's no question about that. And I don't think I think that there's a real problem there. I think that we can continue to just be strong voices and advocates, but also start to, I think, tell a different story. And I really appreciate that, about the different story and how we connect that earlier on to the imagination of young people, right? So that if you see something, you get exposed to it, you begin to think about it and imagine yourself in those roles. And that's kind of what you described, and like that you want to be for people who see you, right? So I think that that's just a critical point to flag for anybody that's listening now live, anybody that follows up on this later. The undermining of public education has negatively impacted the profession and the pipeline. There's just no doubt about that. I mean, it's pretty self-evident. The other side of one of the things that you mentioned was kind of like the legislative function. And I wanted to just hit on this, right? So yes, we send people to Juneau, and we want in Juneau the base student allocation to be raised to keep up with their basic inflation. That would put us in a stronger position dealing with the budget gaps that we see. But the other component about all of this is the community perspective, and that's why the funding and the branding, the negative talking about public education, the constant winnowing away of public dollars and trying to privatize them outside of the investment of the public space, that those two worlds combined really give us the position of what the assembly, working with school board members who are very thoughtful, conscientious, our president of the school board, Margot Bellamy, and advocates in the community like yourself to continue to just reframe what we can accomplish when we make these investments, that these are critical investments in early childhood education. These are critical investments in our economic future. And these are critical investments in our ability to produce the quality of just neighbor and children in our community that we want, by really taking that village perspective and all in, and making sure that we're all in. Roz, I'd love to hear your closing thoughts. What could we expect coming forward? What are some of the things that you hope to accomplish? How you hope to use your time? And then I would love for you to stick around in the green room. I'm going to bring my next guest on. And then maybe toward the end of that conversation, we could, if you're still around, we could just chat and see kind of, we'll freestyle with any audience questions. But Roz, leave us with a closing thought to the part of this conversation, but really forward facing. What could we expect? What are you focused on? What do you hope for?
So I'm really focused as the president of the Alaska Coalition of BIPOC Educators. I'm really focused on the equity and people in our community understanding what resources are available to them. You can apply, you can go to asdk12.org. There's a whole preschool section, and not registration, but the preschool tab. You'll go look for the preschool, and there's different things there. It'll tell you about the neighborhood schools. It'll tell you about, if you're a migrant ed type of family, what school you may be qualified for. And it will also tell you about early learning intervention services. You know, a lot of us have NICU babies or anything that may be wrong. You can contact, if your child has been through the PIC program, you can contact early intervention services and have them actually look, screen your child for the proper program. So I just think that parents should be aware, and the community should be aware of the resources that are available to them in that aspect when it comes to preschool. Preschool normally starts at ages 4, but that early intervention services, if your child is screened and qualified, they can start as early as 3 years old. Excellent. So we just need to get on the ball, and we want to see our community moving forward. We want our future is our children. That's right. So if we can just bring the focus back to education in a positive way, remember, It's our community. Everybody cannot afford to go privatized. Everybody cannot go there. But everybody is welcome to do whatever fits their family. That's right. But public education will always be here, because you will always have a passionate teacher like me, and among others. So you'll always have a kid like me who needed that passionate teacher along the way. There's no question about that. Somewhere somebody thought about equity, right? We are here because somebody thought about equity. And even before it was a political term, in their heart, they just knew that they had to do something about the playing field, about moving forward. Roz, I really appreciate you, and I wanted to flag one thing that you said, just so folks again can understand steps forward, which is, even before we talk about new resources, making sure, and one of the things you said you're focused on is making sure parents have access and information about the current resources that are available. That is absolutely vital, right? You want to not leave money on the table while you're looking for new resources, because that's not how it works. You want to exhaust every dollar we can early on while we expand. There are a lot of options in ASD. I appreciate you flagging that website for us. Roz, stick around if you can. But thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time. And I look forward to continuing to chat, Roz. Thank you so much. Thank you. Excellent, everybody. This is a great conversation with a real voice in our community, a person who is passionate, a person who has both the need in terms of their own life and their own family. They have children,
but they also have a calling and recognize the importance of taking that step forward, and then helping to recast the entire profession from their perspective. I think that's critical. I'm thankful that they highlighted some of the resources and challenges that they see as an emerging educator, and then they also really flagged for us the importance it is to make sure that people know what resources are available, and organizations like the BIPOC Teachers Association working to make sure that people are aware of that. So we want to shout out the organizations doing that work as well, and any parent that needs those resources. Again, that was on the ASD website. We'll continue to post the thread information on this chat as well. I'm going to bring our next guest to the stream, and hey, and they now popped on the stream with a wonderful yellow shirt, brightening up our day. Yeah.
Hey,
hey everybody, it's Rihanna Gay. Rihanna, please introduce yourself. Tell folks kind of who you are, what you do, so we know what your perspective and your vantage point is, where you're coming from, and then we'll have a conversation a little bit about some of the other investments, particularly like before and after school programming. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Rihanna, tell us who you are and how you're doing today.
Perfect. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks. I know you gave a land acknowledgement. I just wanted to add a little bit to it. One part I always like to add is we regret the system of colonization that continues to oppress the Dena'ina people and the other indigenous peoples, and will work to dismantle the supremacist structure. With gratefulness and respect, we recognize contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I would like to begin with the I Am poem. I Am, it's a cool poem. I'm sure you probably have worked on that or done that before. I am from Bibles and couches. I am from warm hugs, tasty meals and smiles. I am from the spruce trees. I am from Uno games and Bible studies. I am from Clifton and Gale. I am from laughter and working hard. I am from staying positive yet real. I am from Bibles and couches. I am Rihanna and I am me. Hello, everybody. As I said, my name is Rihanna. I'm an Anchorage resident for over 28 years and enjoy the many beauties that Alaska brings. I am an advocate and passionate about all things justice and education. In our community, just like George and Roz do, we wear many hats. And I volunteer with Alaska Black Caucus. I'm a part of an educator, sorority, church member, a union volunteer, and a coach. I am currently a public school teacher for the past 11 years. This past May, I was one of Alaska's top 40 under 40. In 2021, I was Alaska's Black Teacher of Excellence. And last January, I received the Willard Bowman Human and Civil Rights Award. Willard Bowman is a school that is named after him. He was a very passionate man here in Anchorage and did things with the districts and the university. So thank you for allowing me to introduce myself.
Oh, what an awesome introduction. I may just have you introduce yourself before I speak at another event, because it was such a good introduction. Really great. And first of all, thank you for being with me. Thank you for sharing some time. You are a teacher full-time every day, and you teach at a school in East Anchorage,
Yes.
one of the elementary schools right here in East Anchorage. And so you have a daily perspective as well, in addition to the accomplishments that you've identified for yourself. Rihanna, I would love to hear what are some of the, really, as we get toward the ecosystem of success for our children. And I talked with Roz, and I know you know Roz, a little bit about those early education investments. That's where Roz dedicates a lot of her professional study and time into that space. But I wanted to get a sense of the kids you see. What are the main issues facing families that are visible in school, where what you see in terms of the supports, the resources, and where the gaps are?
Yes. the needs before COVID were very high. And so the needs during and after COVID have even grown higher. And preschool has to fight to be in district buildings because either they're trying to fight to take up space because maybe we need another classroom there, but we need preschool there. So it's a tug of war with that. Sometimes the cost of preschool in district buildings costs too much. So we're looking at space availability, we're looking at costing, and we're also looking at a lack of understanding of how the politics around classroom operate. I'm an educator, like you said, and I said, and with a little bit of teacher jargon, there's something called alliteration. Alliteration is a fancy word for the occurrence of the same soundings of words, such as Sally sold seashells by the seashore. So the alliteration that I would like to bestow upon people is the 3 S's, is salary, solutions, and solidarity. How we need to increase our salary and what is the minimum wage that needs to be increased. Solutions, how I just said, or how I will say that we need to go to the school board meetings, go to the muni meetings, and let our voice be heard. You know, as a person of BIPOC and a person of color who identifies as BIPOC, there are some shows on TV that we all BIPOC people gravitate to. So sometimes those shows on TV have like a little bit of like a little drama, a little scenes here and there. And sometimes those school board meetings have that same feel. So if you want to get a little drama, a little excitement, get your heart rate up, go to the school board meetings, the muni meetings, the town hall meetings, the local. Just join your community so you know what's happening. And I saw some of your posts. You did just a walk around. You skied around your area. I think that's what we have to do as people in our community. Go around our neighborhood to see what's happening. If you, hopefully you'll able to give yourself time. Just go out and ask questions because that's what people, our counterparts do. They ask questions. They get in people's faces. They advocate, and so that's what I also want us to do.
And I really appreciate the advocacy question. You know, just to kind of go off on that for a second. It's raising the voice, raising one's voice is critical to, first of all, being heard. I mean, it's a matter of fact, right? You have to speak out to be heard. Yes. But when we think of even the most fundamental constitutional right and even obligation, it's to petition our government for redress of our grievances. So that means you have to be diligent, you pay attention, and if you see something, say something, right? So especially if you're part of a community that is on the other side of the equity question, often more marginalized and disadvantaged, right? And in our own community, you know, we got a lot of great families who are struggling. And we more people in East Anchorage, where you teach, where your school is, there are more people who are likely to have 2 jobs than 2 homes. And right, I mean, that's just a matter of fact. And 5 out of the 6 elementary schools in East Anchorage and in the Northeast Community Council area are Title I. So it speaks to the community needs and some of the challenges around that I don't think people also recognize as well. There are institutional challenges. High quality requires, you know, a salary that's commensurate with the profession and the positive understanding of it and the critical importance of it. But it's also those other challenges that families are facing in our communities where they're more likely to be working than to be vacating and having any off luxury time. So can we speak to what you see in the across the parents as well, and where those supports, where as a community we could be aware of some of the gaps in supports for families that may be available, or we could think about?
Yes, access and cost are the 2 things that come to me. Either parents aren't aware of the programs that is out there, such as the Boys and Girls Club, or and that's, I hate to say it, I think that's the only one I can think of that provides after school care, the Boys and Girls Club, and maybe like a grandma or somebody watching the kids after school. So they're either not aware of the programs, or we don't know of them, or they can't afford them, or they don't have the means to get to that transportation because the parent is at work. What are they going to do when their child gets out at 3:30 or at a different time? And that is part of the main thing. And it just needs to be advertised, and it needs to be either paid for by the community, paid for by the school, or some by the parent. I don't think it all should come from one person, but I think we just need more solutions to have after school and before school daycare. And that alliteration goes back to, I said salary, and this is part of solutions and solidarity, working together to have those solutions. I like to think of it as a three-legged stool. It's the three legs of the stool are the families, the parents and families, the community, and like the district or the muni. It's really working together to meet all those needs. One thing that I was going to share was that I want to also add some facts to it. A colleague of mine says, I don't want to hear the chatter, the talk, if you don't have the data. So here are some data points. Just looking at the base student allocation, the BSA, how much is given to the districts per student. The BSA is $5,900. That to educate a child in public school, they say it costs about $5,900 a school year. I can drop that in the chat, or you can even Google Alaska BSA. And then I even looked up the cost of an inmate for Alaska is over $50,000. So what does that mean? We're putting more into our inmates than we're giving to our students. And we know our students have needs. As a public school educator, I'm required to teach social emotional learning, science, math, social studies, all these reading, language arts, all these components. My students, our communities have needs, especially with COVID, especially with the high class size. We really need to look at that as well, and along with the recruitment and retention of good educators. I see somebody dropped.
Yeah, they posted in the chat this the BSA of 5,900 in Alaska. Yeah, and that's one of the things we mentioned earlier. Raising that, I mean, for me, these are not political questions. These are fundamental questions, common sense, matter of fact. When they become political, it's because people make political choices to not fund, to not make these investments, and but calling it out is not the political act. So our governor has paused funding, has not increased it, and his fight to not increase the base student allocation, the caucus as well, and then also to put more burden on the school district. That's also true for bond debt reimbursement, and so there's also been a problem keeping the word of the state for several years there as well. So we've had downward pressure from the top on public schools, both in branding, as Roz mentioned earlier, but to the dollars and the funding. And someone asked me a question. I saw a question earlier as well about things that the assembly could do, and that's why the solidarity part I think is important. And I'll highlight the assembly passes the full budget, and by law we have a limit of what that number is, and the school board then does all of the internal workings of the allocations, and thereby what the assembly can continue to do is fully fund education up to the max under the formula here in the municipality. Now we can also work to expand, and this is the other part, the resource pool for pre-K and before and after school programming, and I'm going to mention that somebody who's working on that in a second. But that question of the resources for parents is a question both for the state, and I hope our delegation hears this. I know my East Anchorage members are strong public education advocates, but at the municipal level, we have to hold the line and make sure that an administration doesn't come along and want to underfund and fund to the max. We had to always fund to the max locally, and then work around community efforts to be able to support the gaps, both in terms of the financial gaps for programs that cost money. One program that's out there that you didn't mention, but Campfire is another before and after school program. Really important program as well. And I was in the municipality working as the special assistant to the mayor for education, amongst other things, where I remember us making sure that part of a grant we were able to give fully funded free Campfire at a number of the Title I schools for that year. So there's always that great need that we to be able to close the gaps where the vulnerable families are. But I just wanted to highlight that that's something in solidarity that the assembly can work on to make sure we hold the line up to the law that's allowable, that the assembly can support, and then also make sure that we're mobilizing community efforts. Rihanna, I'm going to bring Roz back in so we can just all riff off of each other. Feel free to just popcorn in as well, even riff off what I said, but I'd love to have just all of us on the line. Hey, everybody, I feel like that's really great energy. Jeremy, my campaign manager's posting some stuff on the chat, so I'll just flag that as well. And but I wanted to just hit us and look at the solidarity question, and the way we can work with a community effort to get the second S that you mentioned, which are solutions, right? And so I want us to talk about two different areas first, just so we can close this in this way. Both, again, the pre-K and again before and after programs, but looking at one of the things that you mentioned, Rihanna, which was the cost in district buildings. So I want to look at community providers and nonprofits who do this work for the before and after school, and a mixed model. I'm going to share another graphic that I was able to find as a springboard for us, and this is on Threads website again, everybody. But I posted it on our screen. It's the overlay, and it basically is a pre-K mixed delivery system, right? That is really about a licensed, regulated core settings that follow common quality standards, learn and grow, and employ professional educators, Alaska Seed. So this is about public school pre-K, family childcare, center-based childcare, Head Start, tribal, military, and community-based programs, all trying to meet the needs of for families and children in this pre-K mixed delivery system. But this really highlights the need why solidarity and solutioning is important. Who's doing what? Do you know if there are any folks that we can highlight today as additional resources, back to Ra's point, so folks can find these resources out in the community? And then also, what other things are, back to the gaps, what could we be doing in these spaces around the mixed delivery, both for pre-K and before and after school programs, so we can bring all of our talents and resources to bear on finding solutions? Feel free to jump on in. Who wants the popcorn?
So I'll jump in really quick, but because what got me earlier and what people need to realize is Rihanna only called out Boys and Girls Club, which is in my neighborhood. But there's also Campfire. But I think people need to understand how important that is. Before and after school care, that's another issue. Like, that's an issue in its own gambit, especially when it comes to working families.
Yep.
Because if you have to choose between, I got to be to work at 8:00 in the morning, I got to make sure my child gets up, you have children walking to school, taking care of themselves in the morning because their parents they have nowhere to take them. And God bless Boys and Girls Club, Mountain View. But it's just like, what are they supposed to do? If you have parents that work past 3:30, What are they supposed to do? I have 5 kids total. I would never pay for after school care. And I'm just trying to tell you because it's too expensive. That would be where my whole check went. And I want to put my kids in like gymnastics, karate, all these different things because those those costly options are there. And sometimes they even pick up kids from school.
That's right.
But we've got to get to something to where it's like, what programs or what could we do? My school has gone out on a limb where we actually open our doors at 8 o'clock in the morning for our kids. We actually have the National Guard volunteering some mornings and other volunteers that come and read with our children.
To open up the space a little earlier.
We have, and when I tell you, so many parents are grateful for that.
Of course.
I mean, the Boys and Girls Club is safe. They get on the bus, but what is it like to just be able to drop your kids off at school? But again, that goes back to what Rihanna talked about when it comes to the cost of the building, the bills, and then paying your teachers. Because you got to pay somebody to be watching those kids at 8 o'clock in the mornings.
Right.
Per contracts, most teachers don't even clock on until 8:30, right? So, or don't have to do anything till like 8:30, 8:45, one of those times.
Let me ask you both the question because I know we're about to run out of time. I love this because folks in the community recognize there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to focus, but moving forward towards solutions is really important. I appreciate you flagging that National Guard kind of intervention in the school. I think that's just a way to open up people's minds to understand that there are other ways we can bring in our community resources from the outside in. I know that there's some things happening this weekend that I wanted to highlight as well out in the community. But hey, I wanted to get your opinion on this. And I found that most people that I've talked to support this idea, but there may be some difference of opinion. All right.
I wanted to add.
Go ahead.
Growing our own, advocating together. Geriatrics and pediatrics have a lot in common. They have they have time, repetition, and slow pace. We need to organize some way to have older people in the schools after school helping, or even before, because they wake up around the same time. That's a possible.
Absolutely. Thank you for. I like that too because that just highlights. I'll go to the other person, but that highlights the nature of community schools. Mm-hmm. And thinking of every person in the community school across all the generations as being valuable, right, and as an asset. So I think that's a really important element. But here's the question around policy. Again, tell me. I would love to hear what you all think. Ivy Sponholz, I connected with them earlier today. They were unable to be on the line, but I was hoping that they would also just pop on for a few minutes. They're working on an initiative with some other advocates in the community to connect with the local marijuana sales tax and to be able to pull a portion of the locally collected marijuana sales tax into education, into pre-K, into before and after school programming. The state already has money from the state collected marijuana sales tax at the wholesale level that goes into education through the form of the grants that the states have available. You may know about that. But locally, we don't put any money of our locally collected marijuana sales tax into it. It's an issue that I've been advancing and driving since working in the mayor's office. I hope to see it as a ballot initiative that I will support. But I'd love to hear your perspective on is this something that you see as an opportunity to help get to the closing of some of those gaps around costs and some of the financial things with a few more extra dollars in the system locally that we may be able to bring up? Just love your thoughts. Is that a good idea? Do you support that? And
I mean, I support it because, again, like I said earlier, we need to get back to what matters first, and it's education. So, we're pulling from everywhere else, putting it into every other pot except for the education pot. So
We got to get that.
You know what I'm saying? I don't see why that would be bad. What about you, Rihanna?
Yeah, what do you think?
Yes, I think that is a great idea. And also we have to, dang, I lost my train of thought. We are a rich state. We just have poor spending habits, especially going back to when you had to rob Peter to pay Paul, that mentality with our PFD, because Alaska was in a crisis, you took away from its people.
Right. Hello.
We have to have better spending habits. And with the PFD, we're one of the only states that do that, or the only state that does that. So we need to spend our money better. And it trickles down. If the state can't do it, then its residents can't do it. So we just need to re-look at that. And I like that taxing the alcohol tax as well.
And we do the alcohol tax now for treatment. And then now there's new grants coming online for working with students around ACEs. And that's before and after school programming. So I talked, one of the pastors, I remember a couple of years ago when I was advancing that, and I was talking with them, because I did the research while in the mayor's office and recognized that we're one of the only municipalities who tax marijuana, who use no portion of it for education and for youth development. It's like an outrage to me. So I hope that we get there. Now, there are people who have a moral objection. One of the pastors told me, and I'll close on this, they put it best, which was, people already voted for it. We might as well turn a vice into something nice. And put it into the investments that we need in our community, so that we can keep our kids in a healthier, safe environment, other than having the streets calling to them, right? And so I think that's the right perspective for me. I appreciate you all. Rihanna, I want to make sure that people know the things that are going on. So let's just do announcements really quick as people. I'm going to post it on the screen. It's a long one.
It is long.
Remember that nominations for the Black Excellence in Education Awards, the B Awards, are open until February 11th. Here's a link. And we'll also make sure we post the link on my page, Rana, so we can share it across our page. I also want to highlight that I think on Saturday at the Fairview Rec Center, is that right?
It
is the Hoops for Unity basketball event from 1:30 to 3:30. Is that about right?
1:30, 3:30.
1:30 to 3:30 from the Alaska Black Caucus is hosting that. You have more information, other sponsors do you know anything more about it? I know you're sharing that as well. My son is signed up, my 14-year-old. We go every time we can to the Hoops for Unity. It's always a great event. This is kind of community coming together. Yeah.
Exactly. Wells Fargo supported Alaska Black Caucus and the Alaska Community Foundation and Allies for Change. The last thing I dropped in the chat was the 2024 Alaska Teacher of the Year. Feel free to nominate a teacher, aka me or Roz, who have the respect and the admiration of their colleagues. We would like, of course, our winners to look like our students and staff, our population. And something else, the data, and I know it's almost time. There's something that I do every school at the beginning of every school year called Alaska Development Profile. I assess the students, which is mandated by the deed or the seed, and I look at their physical well-being, their social emotional development, and their approaches for learning and cognitive growth. 18% of 5 and 6 year olds coming into kindergarten consistently meet their goals. So what that means is almost 80% of kinders are not coming into kindergarten with a solid foundation ready to learn, which goes back, we need pre-K, we need to fund it. I know Matt Clayman and Ivy Sponoff have been doing great things in Juneau.
That's right. And Ivy's no longer in the state legislature, so they continue to work on this privately. I do expect that at least locally, we will have this on a local ballot coming up soon, so that we have the opportunity to use the third S, solidarity, in an election to establish the public support for early childhood education and before and after school programming. First of all, thank you, folks. Thank you, friends, for being with me. Everybody who's tuning in, my name is George Martinez. I am a candidate for the assembly here in East Anchorage, District 5, Seat I. I'm running to replace Pete Peterson, who's retired. He's term limited. He's retiring. He's term limited, and I'm proud to have his support. I want to be real clear with folks. In the past, we used to talk about education as part of, and the investments in early childhood education as part of the overall positive good, what it takes for positive development. And we used to have to try to make the case to the business community to support this work and these investments, because we had to make an economic case. We had to say that every dollar invested in early childhood education produces this much in return. And those numbers are still true. I invite you to visit the Thread website for all of that data and all of that really accurate up to the year information. But most importantly, what we know is that to be able to grow our economy and give working families the opportunity to get their feet moving forward, the opportunity to go to school, to upskill, upcycle, to be able to move forward and advance, to be able to start our kids early on in a journey that builds our economy and makes our city a connected, safe, and thriving place. It's now time to recognize that the investment in education is about growing our economy. It is no longer up for debate about whether or not we should be investing and whose kids go. We recognize that parents, working families, and communities need pre-K, early childhood education, and before and after school programming to keep our children successful, but to make sure that we continue to have the opportunity to thrive as a family, both working and or as entrepreneurs, building our economic foundation. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you all for tuning in. I look forward. The election day is April 4th coming up. Let's take it to the streets. Let's keep making sure these issues are on the ballot and we support candidates who are going to champion our children. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. And thank you to my friends and guests.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Good job.
Bye.